Jesus' true race has been ignored for centuries, and today I am going to tell you the exact reason why. Welcome to God's Word Unmasked, where we peel back the layers of biblical history to reveal hidden truths and fascinating stories. If you enjoy our content, consider subscribing, and we promise to keep bringing you engaging and enlightening videos. Today, we are diving into the true story of Black Jesus and why he has been erased from history. We all know the story of Jesus Christ, the figure whose teachings have shaped entire civilizations, inspired billions, and continue to bring comfort and hope to so many. But there's a part of his identity that's often been overlooked or even erased: his African heritage. For centuries, Western cultures have painted Yeshua as a fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure in religious art and imagery. But here's the thing: that portrayal is far from the historical and geographical reality of who Jesus really was. The idea that Jesus may have had African lineage isn't new, but it's been buried for so long, hidden beneath layers of cultural and theological suppression. Now, let's get one thing straight. Questioning the common depiction of Jesus as a white man might shake up some long-held beliefs, but ignoring the possibility of a Black Jesus, that means erasing a crucial part of his story, one that has the power to reshape how we think about race, identity, and faith today. In a world where discussions around racial justice, identity, and inclusion are more relevant than ever, rediscovering Jesus' African identity is more than just a historical curiosity. It holds profound significance. Why has this part of his identity been forgotten? And why is reclaiming it so vital today? To find out, we need to dive into early historical records, confront the deliberate erasure of this narrative, and embrace the importance of reclaiming this truth. Curious to learn more? Be sure to subscribe for more eye-opening content, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's start with tracing the African roots of Yeshua, rediscovering a forgotten legacy. To uncover the forgotten story of Black Jesus, we must first look at the historical and biblical records that connect him to Africa. Born in Bethlehem in Roman-occupied Judea, Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew, living at the crossroads of three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. Judea's location made it a melting pot of cultures and people, and back then, race wasn't defined in rigid categories like it is today. Ethnic diversity was embraced. One of the clearest connections between Jesus and Africa comes from the Gospel of Matthew. When King Herod issued a decree to kill all male infants, Joseph took Mary and baby Jesus and fled to Egypt, a North African country. Egypt had long been a place of refuge for the Jewish people, especially during times of persecution, like the Babylonian exile. Jesus' escape to Egypt wasn't just a pivotal moment in his early life. It also symbolizes his family's deep connection to the African continent. It's no coincidence that Africa was a place of safety for Jesus, continuing a tradition of African lands offering refuge. But here's something that might surprise you. Egypt was populated by dark-skinned people of African descent. The fact that Mary, Joseph, and Jesus blended into this society suggests that they shared similar physical traits. If they looked vastly different, they likely would have attracted unwanted attention. This small detail hints that Jesus and his family likely had African features, far from the whitewashed images commonly portrayed in Western art. Ancient depictions of Jesus in Africa also support this connection. In Egypt and Ethiopia, early Christian art often shows Jesus with dark skin, woolly hair, and distinctly African features. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the world's oldest Christian communities, regularly portrayed Jesus in ways that reflected their own ethnic identity. And it didn't stop with Egypt. In Ethiopia, where Christianity dates back to the 4th century, Jesus has long been depicted as having African roots. Another important figure in Jesus' life was Simon of Cyrene, the man who helped carry Jesus' cross. Simon was from Cyrene, a city in modern-day Libya, North Africa. His presence in such a crucial moment serves as another reminder of Africa's deep ties to the story of Jesus. While these accounts don't offer absolute proof of Jesus' African heritage, they challenge the long-standing portrayal of a white Jesus that has dominated Western culture. From Renaissance art to modern media, images of a fair-skinned, blue-eyed Jesus have reflected European ideals, erasing the ethnic diversity that surrounded his life. But despite centuries of suppression, the idea of a black Jesus has endured, especially across Africa and among people of African descent. Pause. Do you want to read the Book of Giants? Or the Book of Adam and Eve? Maybe even the early life of Jesus? Lucky for you, we are launching a weekly newsletter packed with powerful stories from apocryphal texts. Plus, you'll get a Bible verse to pray over each week. Don't miss out on these hidden treasures of faith. Check the link in the description box to join. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Let's return to the video. For many, Jesus is not just a symbol of divine love and sacrifice, but also a reflection of their own ethnic and cultural identity. In conclusion, while the African identity of Jesus may not be widely accepted in Western culture, the evidence from biblical accounts, ancient migrations, and early Christian art shows that his connection to Africa runs deep. Reclaiming this truth offers a more inclusive and authentic understanding of Jesus, one that honors the diversity of the ancient world and challenges the racialized images that have shaped Christianity for centuries. By tracing these African roots, we rediscover a Jesus who truly belongs to all of us. The erasure of Jesus' African identity wasn't a mere oversight, it was intentional. Cultural, political, and theological forces drove this shift, and as Christianity spread through Europe, it became intertwined with imperial power and later colonial expansion. European rulers, especially during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, strategically promoted an image of Jesus that looked like them, fair-skinned, blue-eyed, and European. Why? To consolidate power and legitimize their authority. A white, European-looking Jesus reinforced their supremacy and reshaped the religious narrative to fit their political goals. A key turning point in this transformation was during the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. After his conversion to Christianity, Constantine declared it the official religion of the Roman Empire. This merge of political unity and spiritual power led to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, a pivotal moment that helped shape Christian doctrine and began the shift towards portraying Jesus with European features. This wasn't just about art. It was a deliberate effort aligned with the Roman Empire's goals. The image of a white Jesus slowly erased his true Middle Eastern and African roots. As European colonialism spread, this whitewashed image of Jesus crossed the Atlantic to the Americas. European colonizers used this image to justify their conquest and the subjugation of indigenous and African peoples. A white Jesus symbolized divine authority, which was then weaponized to rationalize the systemic oppression of non-white populations. Missionaries reinforced this image, presenting it to African and indigenous peoples, thereby promoting racial hierarchies and pushing the dangerous idea that whiteness equaled spiritual superiority. This whitewashing was further entrenched by theologians who downplayed or ignored Jesus' African connections. By the time of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, the white image of Jesus was so deeply embedded in Christian thought that any suggestion of a black or African Jesus was dismissed as heretical or irrelevant. Even though the Reformation brought changes to Christian practice, it didn't challenge this racialized image of Jesus. The consequences of this erasure were far-reaching. By portraying Jesus as white, European Christians reinforced the belief that whiteness was tied to divinity and moral purity, while non-white people were marginalized. This distorted belief system helped justify slavery, colonialism, and racial segregation. The white Jesus became a symbol of power and superiority, reinforcing systems of oppression that harmed African, indigenous, and non-European peoples for centuries. Religious leaders and political rulers worked together to maintain these racial hierarchies, using the image of a white Jesus to uphold social control. Meanwhile, the African connections to Jesus, such as his family's flight to Egypt or the role of Simon of Cyrene, were downplayed or reinterpreted to fit a Eurocentric narrative. Over time, the idea that Jesus could have resembled the people of the Middle East or North Africa was overshadowed by European depictions. This distorted image not only reinforced racial divisions, but also reshaped the spiritual understanding of Christianity. Promoting a white Jesus helped create a worldview where non-white people were seen as inferior. This belief system laid the foundation for racist ideologies that justified exploitation, slavery, and colonization. The image of a white Jesus supported the development of systems that dehumanized African, indigenous, and other non-European peoples. Today, scholars and theologians are challenging this historical distortion by re-examining biblical texts, historical records, and early Christian art. They are working to reclaim Jesus' African identity. This isn't just about correcting historical inaccuracies. It's about addressing the deep racial injustices that have been perpetuated in the name of Jesus for centuries. Restoring Jesus' African roots is a crucial step toward dismantling the harmful belief that divinity is tied to whiteness. It promotes a more inclusive and just vision of Christian faith. For African and African-descended Christians, reclaiming the image of a Black Jesus is a powerful act of empowerment. For many, Jesus is not just a symbol of divine love and sacrifice, but also a reflection of their own ethnic and cultural identity. For too long, they have been disconnected from a version of Jesus that reflects their own racial and cultural identity. By recovering the African aspects of Jesus' life, they can reconnect with a version of their faith that honors their heritage. This reclamation is not only an act of historical justice, but also a reminder that Jesus' message of love, equality, and justice transcends race and culture. In conclusion, the deliberate erasure of Black Jesus was a calculated effort to reshape Christianity to align with European political and racial agendas. This distortion contributed to the development of racist ideologies that have had lasting effects on Christian theology and society. Reclaiming Jesus' African identity is a crucial step toward healing the racial divisions perpetuated by this whitewashing. It challenges the long-standing association between whiteness and divinity and offers a more inclusive and accurate vision of Jesus for believers of all races and cultures. In today's world, the forgotten story of Black Jesus holds incredible significance, especially in the ongoing fight for racial justice, identity, and equality. As the legacies of racism, colonialism, and white supremacy continue to shape modern societies, the image of a Black Jesus challenges deep-rooted ideas about power and privilege. Reclaiming this image is more than just about setting the record straight. It's an opportunity to reimagine how religion can be a force for healing, solidarity, and justice in a world still grappling with historical injustices. For many African Americans, the image of a white Jesus has been a source of pain and alienation. During slavery, millions of Africans were forcibly converted to Christianity, not out of concern for their spiritual well-being, but as a means of control. White Jesus was presented as the embodiment of their oppressor, reinforcing the idea that whiteness was linked to godliness, authority, and superiority. Enslaved Africans were expected to worship a deity who looked like their enslavers, creating a painful contradiction. The message of liberation found in the Gospels was overshadowed by a figure that symbolized white supremacy. Even after slavery ended, the image of a white Jesus persisted in Black churches, shaping how many African Americans related to their faith. This portrayal created a disconnect between the liberating teachings of Jesus and the lived experiences of African Americans. How could they reconcile their faith in a Savior who preached justice for the oppressed with a whitewashed figure that was used to justify oppression? This dissonance sparked a desire to reclaim Jesus in a way that resonated with their own experiences and identity. In recent years, the movement to reclaim Black Jesus has gained momentum. Theologians, pastors, and activists particularly within movements like Black Lives Matter, emphasize the importance of Black Jesus in affirming Black dignity and humanity in the face of systemic racism and violence. Black Jesus is not just a figure from history. He stands as a powerful symbol of resistance to oppression, embodying the struggles of the poor, marginalized, and oppressed. The life of Jesus, as told in the Gospels, reflects the story of someone born into poverty, living under Roman occupation, and ultimately executed for challenging injustice. For many African Americans and people of color, this story resonates deeply with their own experiences of racial oppression, police violence, and economic exploitation. The image of Black Jesus also critiques systemic racism and white supremacy within both religious and secular institutions. By reclaiming Jesus as a man of African descent, theologians and activists challenge the long-standing association between Christianity and whiteness that has dominated Western thought for centuries. In this sense, Black Jesus becomes a radical symbol of justice and equality, reminding us that God's love and liberation extend to all people, regardless of race or ethnicity. In contrast to the whitewashed depictions of Jesus that have long dominated churches and religious art, Black Jesus calls us to reimagine Christianity as a faith that defends the oppressed and stands against all forms of racial and social injustice. This reclamation also impacts the broader conversation about race and identity within the church. Multiracial and African American congregations are rethinking traditional portrayals of Jesus, recognizing that these depictions are not neutral, but reflect centuries of racial bias. By embracing Black Jesus, these communities are affirming their own identities and experiences, while also challenging the narratives that have excluded them for so long. This shift is part of a larger movement to reflect the global diversity of Christianity, acknowledging that Jesus' message transcends racial, cultural, and ethnic boundaries. Outside of religious institutions, Black Jesus has become a potent symbol in the fight for racial justice. Movements like Black Lives Matter have drawn on the image of Black Jesus as a figure who resists state-sanctioned violence and oppression. In protests, speeches, and art, Black Jesus is invoked as a reminder that the fight for racial equality is not just a political battle, it's a spiritual one. The parallels between Jesus' life and the lives of people of color facing injustice today are striking. Like Jesus, many are subjected to violence, dehumanization, and oppression at the hands of the state. The story of Black Jesus also challenges Christians to confront how religion has been used to justify inequality. It asks believers to reflect on how they see Jesus and what those perceptions reveal about their views on race, power, and privilege. If Jesus is seen as a figure of divine authority who is white, what does that say about the ways white supremacy has shaped religious thought? But if Jesus is understood as a person of color, oppressed by the political and religious authorities of his time, how might that change how we think about justice and inequality today? For those committed to racial justice, Black Jesus offers a hopeful vision of a world where all people are seen as equal in the eyes of God. He calls believers to a deeper understanding of the gospel, one that emphasizes solidarity with the marginalized. In this vision, Black Jesus is not just a historical figure, but a living symbol of God's commitment to justice, liberation, and human dignity. In conclusion, the relevance of Black Jesus today lies in how he challenges deeply ingrained ideas about race, identity, and justice. In a world still shaped by the legacies of racism, reclaiming Black Jesus is a powerful act of resistance, reminding us that the struggle for racial justice is both spiritual and political. Through this reclamation, theologians, activists, and believers are offering a new understanding of Christianity, one that centers the experiences of the oppressed and calls for a more just and inclusive world. Ultimately, the story of Black Jesus matters because it touches the core of what it means to be human. Jesus didn't come for the powerful and privileged. He came for the marginalized, the oppressed, and those cast aside by society. He lived as an outcast, persecuted by the authorities, and stood with those denied their dignity and humanity. The story of Black Jesus is, at its essence, a story of liberation, one that challenges systems of power and offers hope to those who have been silenced. In remembering Black Jesus, we remember the fullness of a faith that has the power to heal, transform, and unite people across all boundaries of race and ethnicity. This act of remembrance is not just about correcting history. It's about reclaiming the true essence of Christianity, a vision of a just, inclusive, and loving world where all are seen as equal in the eyes of God. Black Jesus is not merely a figure from history. He is a symbol of the ongoing struggle for justice, a beacon of hope for the oppressed, and a reminder that dismantling racism is a sacred calling for all who believe in justice. As we seek to restore the story of Black Jesus, we must also recognize its broader implications for how we see ourselves and our world. This is not just about historical correction, it's about spiritual renewal. To remember Black Jesus is to remember the radical love, justice, and compassion he embodied. It's to embrace a faith that transcends racial, ethnic, and cultural divides, offering a vision of unity, healing, and reconciliation. In restoring the story of Black Jesus, we are not simply looking back. We are being invited to create a more just and equitable future for all. Don't forget to like this video and drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. Let's continue this journey together as we dive into more stories that bring light to what's been hidden.